Welcome to the Gerber Kawasaki YouTube channel, where today we are bringing together two industry leaders that have shaped the future of marketing and wealth management. So today we're joined by Erik Huberman, the innovative founder and CEO of Hawke Media, a firm that's been growing like crazy, revolutionizing the marketing landscape. His company has worked with thousands of brands like Red Bull, Sweet Green, Barstool, Casamigos, and I mean, really the list goes on. So thank you so much for being on the show today. Erik,
yep.
I know you recently came out with a book, Hawke Method. I read it. And I know that Hawke wasn't the first company that you started. So I wanted you to kind of bring us through your story of how you started Hawke Media and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Trying to make a long story short. Yeah, grew up around an entrepreneurial family. Just always thought that if I was going to get a job, it was to learn something and that I'd always end up starting something. I just took it for granted in the literal sense.
Did you grow up in LA?
Born here, but grew up in Ojai. So moved up there when I was 6. Yeah.
It's a good place
and my
to be.
dad was in the waste business and then invested in real estate using the waste business. So I grew up around just a hustler and hard worker. My grandfather also ran a scrap metal yard in East LA and just was surrounded by a lot of entrepreneur friends' dads that I was like, oh, so I just assumed that's what you did was you might go work for someone.
You went into a complete digital business and families like in such a physical industry.
No, my dad's favorite line when I was starting was, I have no idea what you're doing, but as long as it's legal, I'm proud of you. Like, yeah, sounds
like,
good.
I didn't tell you about the cannabis farm, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and honestly, out of college, I went into real estate because I grew up around it. I worked in my dad's office when I was in high school. I went and I got my real estate license and went to work for a company called Sperry Van Ness out of college, but it was a week to the day before Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And so a year into that, I made $350 and went, all right, I got to do something else. So I started an online music company that I raised $1 million for in 2009 at 22 years old. And didn't realize how, honestly, till recently, like how crazy that was that I actually raised money as a 22-year-old in 2009.
Difficult it is to make money in music, too.
Yeah. Well, we ended up getting it to profitability, but it was never going to be a big business, which is why I moved on. I hired a CEO for it. 2 years later, started a t-shirt subscription company called Swag of the Month that we sold a year and a half later. That was like one of the first e-commerce subscription companies.
Yeah, I had a t-shirt company, one of my first companies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice. There you go.
What t-shirts were you making?
I was making political t-shirts, but this was back in 1988. Yeah, nice. I got an artist in Venice, this guy, Robbie Canal, and it was during the election, 1988. I hated George Bush. Yeah. It was the first George Bush. That's how old I am. And so we made political t-shirts and sold them, and we got on MTV, and this was when MTV was the channel to watch. And we sold everything. And that's when I learned the power of mass communications. That's when I was like, all right, whatever you do, if you don't have a good communication strategy, if you don't understand how to leverage media, you're spending a lot of time hawking stuff at retail. So, that helped me with the idea of like, wait, it doesn't matter what your product is, nobody knows. You know? And once everybody knew, boy, we sold out all our t-shirts and unfortunately Dukakis did not win that election. But it was a great experience.
That's awesome. And it's such an easy entry point to entrepreneurship. Like printing t-shirts is not difficult. So it was
and you learn all the like key things of running a business.
Exactly.
It's a straightforward product. So you're not really caught up on just making a product. Right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And that's when I got recruited by Science, an incubator here in Santa Monica. They had just launched a company called Dollar Shave Club. They said, "Hey, come advise."
Familiar with it?
Yeah. So they were like, "Hey, can you advise us on? You grew yours and sold it.
But it's not $1. It's like $12.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, their average order value I think was $5 when they launched. Yeah, because there was $1.
Isn't it the first month is $1? It starts with something about $1.
I think it was really.
I think you could get the like really well, they had a really basic razor that you could get for $1. And then, but if you added anything, it became $5.
Now they got the 6-blade razor, and I was like 6 blades. I got 6 blades going.
Yeah, from what I know, Unilever's not so happy about that acquisition.
Well, it was because they spent a lot of money on it with the idea that people would buy other products. From them.
Yeah,
and people just don't. I don't.
Nope.
I still got my razors. And that's a good business. There's another. There's a couple other shave companies that it's not a high barrier to entry.
No. Harry's has done it pretty well too.
Yeah.
So we worked there for a year, helped them launch an activewear brand that we sold to Bally Total Fitness after a year called Ellie that's still running, and then started advising consulting for a bunch of brands and went, wow, this marketing world, similar to what you saw, it's critical, but I also saw there's no barrier to entry as a marketer. So 99% of them have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
And so the frustration that every entrepreneur, I've yet to find an entrepreneur that doesn't have a horror story about a marketing agency. And so
that's why we've never used one.
Right. Yeah. what I hear over and over again. And so I went, all right, well, there's got to be a way to solve this where we can be the best at what we do, but easy to work with, because that was a balance. The really good agencies become really hard
and also
to
it's like
engage.
painful. Like I was doing AdWords myself for a long time, and you know, I just had to study AdWords constantly because it's like this amazing product, but it's constantly changing. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, you know, I've had enough.
And when you're starting to do that too for Gerber Kawasaki and, you know, posting on Facebook, it wasn't even allowed to do that in the wealth management space.
I mean, we were so early on Facebook, you know, I was like trying to use my stepfather's EDU account, you know, because you had to be a student. And he was the chancellor of UCLA. So he was like, you can't do that. You can't use my email.
Yes. It's a chance where that might be chance.
So then finally they opened up to regular people and, you know, we signed up. But those were the days when your newsfeed was really like your friends. And, you know, we got a lot of fans right off the bat, but there was no policy from the SEC or anything about social media at the time. And we figured it was during the financial crisis. So AIG, who was overseeing our operations, was gutted. So there was no compliance people. So we were just doing whatever we wanted, and we didn't get anything approved because it was like there was nobody there. And then a couple of years later, they hired some people, and they go, "Oh, we're trying to come up with rules for FINRA." And FINRA came to us and said, "Oh, you know, will you help us make the rules?" And so that's how long we've been doing social media in finance. We were the first firm to really do it. And I think we've been the first firm on most of the social platforms.
And I would say most firms still don't leverage it. It's kind of crazy.
Well, I think most people live in marketing fear is what I call it.
Yeah.
And even within our firm, we have it. And what it is that the more visible you get, the more people know and like your brand, and the more people don't like your brand.
Correct.
And so that ratio, whatever it is, doesn't matter as long as people like your brand.
Yeah.
And you probably learned that working with Barstool. And you know, I was on the Portnoy show once, and you know, not really. It was, you know, a challenging interview.
It was funny. It was entertaining.
Yeah.
No, but it was like the idea was like we got out there to a huge audience, whether he was trying to pick on me or not, you know, and it was great for us. It was great.
Was that post him like playing the rich guy or pre?
No, this was like during 21.
This had to be 2021.
It was going nuts, and he was like Mr. Stock Guy.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Who's this Portnoy guy?" You know, and then he called me names and all this kind of stuff, and he tried to make me out as like this suit, you know, and I'm like, "Dude, I'm the unsuit suit," you know, like we're the
we have no minimums.
Financial firm.
We work with many young people.
So
what was he calling himself? I remember that when he was
DTDG. Day Trader?
Yeah,
he still tries to do this once in a while.
Yeah.
Like
he started it back up again now that markets come back. When everything was bad, like last year, that show was done.
Well, what you learn is how hard it is to do what we do. I mean, that's
100%.
The lesson. But yes, going backwards, I think, you know, most companies today, and I'm sure you deal with this a lot, which is like, oh, we want all this upside, but we don't want to do the things that it takes to get attention.
Right. You know, I'd say in the financials, and we do a lot in the financial sector, yes. Most companies I don't think are as worried about, I mean, listen, if they see a bunch of negative reactions, they're worried, but generally they understand, like most companies coming to us understand they need to do these things.
Yeah, we've only seen a few like real disasters like the Bud Light thing where it's like...
Right, but in the Bud Light thing, so it's funny, going into that, like, and I know the team there, like what happens, in my opinion, with a lot of these is not the problem of the move they make. So like what most people don't know about the Bud Light thing is that was 1,000 influencer campaign. It wasn't like they took this one influencer.
Oh, I know. Totally.
It's insane.
I know.
The issue there wasn't what they did. To me, it's the apology. It's don't feed the trolls.
That too. But it shows you once again the risk of doing things. Yeah. Because obviously it makes sense to have a diverse group of influencers, especially for a massive brand.
Yeah.
But the way things blow up on the internet. Yeah. And that's I think what a lot of people's fear is here too. It's like you can do an interview or you can say one thing and next thing you know, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And you know, honestly, we've seen what it's done to Elon and Tesla. You know, it's like it went from probably one of the best brands in the world to now somewhere down the bottom because of politics, for example.
Well, and as someone that just got rid of his Tesla, and thank God
I
did.
did.
Yeah, I had it for 5 years. Not because I have anything wrong with it. I actually don't really care about Elon. Right. It's because the car falls apart after a few years. And so I don't know that the stock's driven just by the politics.
No, it's not.
I sold my stock. The day I got rid of my Tesla, I sold the stock, and thank God both happened.
Well, the stock it should be irrelevant to politics. It's to sales, but sales are not going up.
No.
And so, you know, that's really the issue.
Because he's diminished there's no residual value of the car.
I got a call from a client today. It's like, I want to sell the rest of my Tesla stock. I don't want to own it. And I'm like, I get it. The brand is not aligned with your values. Like it doesn't align with mine anymore.
Nope.
And Elon made himself the brand, and he shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Because it's really, I'm a huge climate guy. For me, that's everything.
Yeah.
And that's a big investment thing for us. So it's like a super painful thing for me. Actually, I woke up this morning thinking about how painful it is.
Yeah.
That it's like, I love Tesla, but I was doing this BBC interview last night about the Trump thing. And I'm like, since when did the CEO of an EV company interview Donald Trump? Like, it just, that's right. He doesn't care about Tesla anymore. I'm the guy who runs X, you know? And I think that's an interesting dilemma from a marketing perspective.
You saw it with Twitter and Square, like Jack Dorsey. Like I'm still trying to see the long-term success of a CEO running multiple companies.
I don't think it's
masters.
possible.
I don't either. I think you have to serve one master.
I also just think like we want to make these people into superheroes, but they're humans.
Correct.
And so like you have your own company, and I'm sure you're exhausted every day.
Yeah.
And you like, I don't know if you have a family yet or all that stuff too. And then you got, let's say, kids, and then a wife. And so you want to have some life. Like, I don't believe in Elon's life where it's like you just never have fun or a vacation. No, 100%. That's not a life.
Totally agree.
Well, I mean, we're in Santa Monica. How can we not enjoy also being here and living here?
But like life is just like more than how successful you are at work.
Yeah.
It's like, how successful are you at home?
Yeah.
How successful are you with yourself, your health, and your
I think the
well-being,
success is finding a way to have it all work in harmony so that you can do as much of all of it as possible.
I simplify it more to like happiness.
Yeah.
Like happiness is such an elusive goal. And when, like my kids are usually happy. And I was like, why are they so happy compared to adults? And it was like, they deal with none of the problems that we deal with. And like, I would be happy if I was a kid. And I think we all actually strive to be as happy as we were as kids if we had a good childhood. Now in Elon's case, he had a horrible childhood and nightmare. So I don't think he knows what happy is.
Right.
But that said, if you really want to be successful, it's a 12, 14-hour day as an entrepreneur for that one thing. And I've done multiple things at the same time, and I found it to be really taxing. I had a music business too, and
nice.
I play music and had a company and still kind of do, but when we were like trying to run it, I was going both, and I had another CEO. I wasn't the CEO, but still, I'd say it was hard. It was hard.
My closest for it, and like because we have Hawke Media, we have a software company too called Hawke AI, and then Hawke Ventures, our investment side, but it's all synergistic. So I consider it one thing. But launching my book was I'd say my foray into almost two different companies, because a book launch is like running
a whole own thing.
That was the most miserable, exhausting time of my career, period. Easy to
so I was wondering about that, because you said you read a book, and in finance, like everybody uses a book to market themselves, and people have come like, why haven't you written a book? You've done this for 30 years. And I said, well, because I don't think people read, number one, and number, I'd rather
the Audible does great though.
Right. Exactly. But I was like, I could just do
I actually have the physical book out there if you do want to borrow it.
I do actually. I read, like
I know.
I was at the beach this summer with a book. I'm the only one.
That's crazy to me, because I feel like that's what I always do at the beach.
That's why I love the beach. It's like I have time to read, and I swim and surf or whatever. But I mean, it's great. I had a good July. I got to get through some books, but otherwise I can't get through a book because I got to do research all day. So I read earnings reports.
Yeah, exactly. That's my thing. Is I read so much in data and analytics and everything that I like. The last thing I want to do is go from reading a screen to like, all right, time to do this. Like,
so when you wrote the book, was the idea like to help market your business and to get your ideas out there?
That was it.
Or was it like I could make money writing books?
No.
Yeah.
Definitely did never assume that, and thank God, because it's the opposite.
Totally.
No, the whole idea was it was sparked because I got approached by a guy that I was a friend of a friend that did book launches and book marketing, and said, have you thought about writing? And I had actually put together a full outline for another book I wanted to write about, called Greedless. And it was the idea of how to be successful without being greedy.
Right.
But the problem was I figured at the time I was nowhere near successful enough to preach that.
Well, it's like, what's the level?
I've got to be, I feel like I have to be a billionaire to be able to say that.
There's only a couple hundred of those people.
Yeah,
so.
but somewhere a lot higher than I was.
And half of them are criminals. So I don't know if that's the goal.
Right.
So it's interesting, like what people consider successful.
Right.
Like, are you successful enough?
And I think there will be a time for that. I didn't like how
I mean, you don't have a lot of gray hair. That's
not yet.
The problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm also wearing a hat to cover most of it.
But like I am fully gray, basically, almost. It's like, then you get old enough. You're like, okay.
And that's what I thought was like, I shelved that. But then this guy approached me and I'm like, well, I do, like at the time, I still do a ton of public speaking. A lot of it's about the basics of marketing, kind of modern marketing 101.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I mean, I already have the content. And he's like, well, I have a really easy way to write it. Like we get on Zoom. We'll put an outline together. You get on Zoom. You record each chapter in about half an hour.
Right.
We'll transcribe it, edit it, send it back to you. You edit it, and then you're off. And I'm like, great. So in like 8 hours of Zoom calls and a little, a day of work on an outline. I had a book.
Right.
So I was like, that was great. That wasn't the work. Getting the book done was easy. Marketing it was, and even as a marketer with an agency, with every contact, with tons of friends that have tons of bestsellers, and it's like, like the Keith Ferrazzi wrote the forward. Like I had people around me that knew how to sell books.
Well, and you're like a professional marketing guy, right?
But I was on the Drew Barrymore show. I was on all these morning shows. I did the full tour. I was on Adam Carolla. Yeah,
it's so funny. Fun. You're as old as I am. It's weird that she has like a show.
Yeah, no, I get it. But I did the whole tour, and that was exhausting. And we got a bestseller.
So you went to like bookstores and all that kind of stuff,
and did signings and all that.
Yeah.
And
see, to me, that's like old school marketing, right? Yeah. It's like, does that work? I don't know.
Not really. No, I mean, it's still, and so the benefit of the market, and I think the timing was awful. We launched in March of 22, which is right when everybody went, we got to cut our marketing because the rates are going up.
Well,
and we
maybe we should pitch the book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
what it did turn out was less of, and we did sell 30,000 copies. It went well.
Well, that's good.
So it was great. But it's the benefit has actually been our employees, our prospects, our clients.
Oh, yeah, I saw this book.
There it is.
Yeah.
Logo familiar?
The Hawke method, just in case you're looking for a read.
The Hawke method.
Want a light read on
it's a light read. It's 145 minutes according to the thing on the back.
Honestly,
3 different pillars of marketing.
The thing that blows my mind is how many people start businesses and they start these businesses, and I always feel bad when I walk through like a mall or whatever because I'm like, most of these businesses aren't going to make it.
Correct.
And especially in LA where rent's so high.
Yep.
And like being a business guy, like one of my skills is like I can look at any business and tell you if it's good or bad. And like, and then they like don't get marketing. And I'm like, you put so much time into your product. You put so much time into your store. You have this like great business and there's nobody here. Because you didn't put any time into
well, how could you not spend on it? How are you going to retain customers? How are you going to find new ones?
I mean, this book is so well read, it's falling apart.
I know.
That's awesome.
Well, I was taking notes in it, and then I read.
That's a first.
Is this what you were reading with COVID? I mean, she gets COVID every 3 weeks, so she can take time off.
No, I actually was reading it in the sauna at the gym.
Oh, that's awesome.
So the binding of the book started to melt.
That's
amazing.
At least we
don't have to call Random House.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to call them that. That's their job. They got to make good books.
Read this.
But the benefit has been that now we're all on the same page. So when my employees, my clients, everything, they know what we do. They know the basics. So that's been the benefit of the book. It's like a Bible that we
plus it's like
subscribe to.
You see a customer client, like maybe like us, and you say, oh, here's my book.
This is the basics of what we're doing.
It's better
for
to
you.
get to know
exactly
your background.
And it's a quick read. It was also great because I asked her to write a review the day it came out. She's like, I'm not writing a review until I read it. I'm like, okay.
See, that's how you know you marry the right way.
She's great.
My wife would have said the same exact thing.
She goes into her room, comes out 2 hours later.
Did she read it?
She read it in 2 hours.
That's impressive.
And which apparently it's a quick read. She goes, oh, I get what you do now. I'm like, and she's like brilliant. So I was like, we've been together 8 years at the time. I was like, now you get what I do? All right.
See, I don't think my wife does still. And we've been together for 4 years.
Well, maybe you need to write a book.
Well, I thought about that because I was like, what am I going to really write if I'm going to add something to the world like that's permanent that my kid will read one day? Like I want to do like saving and investing your money like is a pretty straightforward concept.
But you just said something really articulate, which is you have an ability to look at a business and know if it's going to do well or not.
Right.
Well,
maybe that should be the book.
Yeah.
Like
why our businesses do well.
Work. Yeah. Right. But I find this generation to be the least entrepreneurial generation ever.
Gen Z or which generation?
Anybody younger than me.
Fair enough. I don't know if I agree with that.
I might be wrong.
Statistically, I think that's probably wrong.
I might be wrong because if you count all the ways you can be entrepreneurial, including like Airbnb,
influencers
Uber,
too,
influencer, like I don't know if I count that as like a business. It's more like it is a business.
It is a business. So that's a big contract.
I think it definitely is. Even with being an influencer, you're running that marketing too.
Okay, maybe I'm completely wrong.
Maybe it's the
exact opposite.
In the Switch, I think there are, but the Switch is there's now digital goods in some sense, which are hard to get your head around.
That's not the part that's hard for me to get around, but I think the point being like I'm an influencer or especially like I know people who run like I just did Turo, which is a great business. Yeah. And we rent our car on Turos now because it's like stupid to use anybody but, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And like I had this great experience with the Turo person. I'm like, this is their job.
Yeah.
Like they probably have multiple cars.
Yep.
And they do a great job with this.
Yep.
It's like
I have some clients that do Turo too.
There's people who have the Airbnb business. They got the the Uber drivers. I look at Uber drivers as entrepreneurial.
Yep.
It's not. These people are doing it because they can earn a decent living and choose when they work and do other things on the side. And
when it's cool because Airbnb created like something you wouldn't even think. It created a like lower market for real estate investing.
Right.
That works. Same thing with Turo. Car enthusiasts can make a business out of being a car enthusiast.
Yeah.
You can have a Ferrari even though you should have never been able to afford one because you can
Rent
offset
it.
the payments.
Yeah, and also like I have these Teslas I can't sell now I can just rent them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back to why I was so happy to get out of it.
I know, seriously.
Yeah.
I can't sell them.
Yeah, I traded it in, and Porsche gave me a really good deal on a Taycan.
Oh, is that what you're driving?
Yeah.
Do you like the Taycan?
Love it.
Good.
But
so you haven't had any issues with software or anything?
Not really, and I would say just don't buy an electric car. Lease.
100%. I just leased the Rivian for my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're much better off leasing.
Yeah, they're going to be.
I won't buy one again.
So did you not sell the Plaid?
No, the Plaid. I actually love the Plaid. You know, it's so weird driving a Cybertruck in a Plaid because one is like the fastest, sleekest car, and the other is just like lumbering tank. And like I kind of like both of them for different reasons, but I also am sort of done with Tesla. So like, you know, my personal brand is much more aligned with like, let's say Rivian today than Tesla. But I can't drive a non-electric car. Mm-hmm. So I've been sort of like stuck.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
Yeah, if you're looking for something, I it's a step up for sure.
So then I was looking at these like hybrid McLaren or something crazy. But then I had a hybrid the other day when I was in rental and I had to go to a gas station. And I vowed in my life.
You forgot what it was like?
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Like gas stations are horrible places. Like it's literally the dirtiest, smelliest place you could go.
And I still like the smell of gas. I know there's like a percentage of people like that. I'm one of them.
I do too.
You do.
It's a thing. No, it's a thing. A lot of people like the smell of gas.
And
I totally get that too because I love actually race cars.
I grew up in the firehouses, so I think it was the smell of gas in the firehouses.
There's definitely gas smell in there with those big trucks.
Yeah.
But you know, I got over that. It's mostly how dirty they, you know, it's like it's gross. But that said, it's the money too. Like spending $100 or $120 to fill up your tank seems crazy to me because I just like plug in my car every night. You know, it's like, and I can't tell the difference on my electric.
Exactly. It's not negligible. And I have solar too. So it's really,
and now I've got these heat pumps on my house instead of, you know, regular. And so it's all electrical. I have no natural gas bill.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, oh my God, I can't even tell the difference on my electric bill.
Well, I found out in Santa Monica, you're not allowed to connect to the gas anymore when you build a new house. They're out. Gas is out.
Right.
Which is pretty crazy.
Right. You gotta live in LA. It's much better. I'm on the board.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a fun gas station story.
Just kidding.
I have a buddy of mine now 12 years ago won the lottery. And it's really rough, speaking of wealth management, when you have a friend that won $107 million at 25 years old.
That sucks.
It becomes real. You're like, oh, you can actually win. So the only place I ever buy lottery tickets are the gas station. And thank God I drive electric. But it's real. So like my wife drives a gas car. And so when I go fill up her car once in a while, I'll buy a couple lottery tickets. Right. I'd be broke, I think, if I actually drove a gas car. Because I'm like, this guy, like,
I don't even want to tell you about my lottery ticket theory, which is you can't buy lottery tickets in Santa Monica. Like nobody's ever won in the history of the lottery. Right? Yeah. So you got to like when you're driving.
Yeah, I guess he was middle of nowhere, Virginia, when he won.
Yeah. So when I'm in random places, that's when I buy lottery tickets.
Good call.
And it has to be at least 100 mil. Yeah. So if it's not 100 mil, I don't play.
Yep.
But that said, we see a few lottery winners, but not 100 mil.
Yeah. $107 million, which was. And we were all 25, went to Vegas.
You got to be kidding me. Yeah. That is so detrimental to your friends group that you win the lottery and now you're like super rich and all your friends are like, oh, I have to just work the rest of my career to come just as close as you.
Yeah, thank God he bought a place in Cabo where we have a place down the street. So that's where we hang out usually. But he moved to Florida for
That's like those stories that do so well on the internet are like the lottery winners who turn into crackheads and stuff and like lose everything. Because people like love those stories because they like, it's like, I need a better outcome than this guy just made all this money doing nothing and lives a straight life.
He has more than doubled his money because he invested it well.
He put it all in Bitcoin.
No, he put it. He was. This is what pissed everyone off, and it's in the news. His dad was a COO of Marriott.
Oh, okay.
So it was 2012. He put all the money in the Marriott Investment Trust, and then they bought Starwood. Yeah. And Marriott, I just looked because Marriott in the past 5 years business. Is up 64%.
We own MGM stock, and Marriott's working with MGM now on their rewards, and it's been great for MGM.
Yeah.
So that's actually, I actually think Marriott's going to make a play on it, but that's just
it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. They have a huge customer base. I mean, it's a massive company. Now, Starwood got taken out, and Barry Sternlicht's been doing.
I know Barry.
All the other stuff.
Did some consulting on the launch of their one hotel in
Miami. We love the one hotel in. We go to Kauai.
Yeah.
So they just opened up that one.
Nice.
That's
awesome.
Amazing. We were there the other week.
Very cool.
6 months ago, and we didn't stay there because it's like $10,000 a night. Yeah, it's like I literally rent this massive house down the street from the one, and it took them years to build the one. So we go to the one for dinner because it's wonderful. Yeah. And it's like more expensive than this massive house that we rent for a little room. And I'm like, why would you do this?
Hotel rooms, if you're not thankfully, like marketing agency, we earn so many credit card points that's frankly how my family travels.
Right,
it's
like just on points.
So like, funny enough, we're going to Hawaii for the first time in 15 years in Labor Day weekend, so in a couple of weeks.
Very fun.
But going to Big Island, going to Kona. But the only way it made sense when I'm looking at like just the price tag on these hotel rooms, it was like, for a basic room in the Kona Village was like $3,000 a night. I'm like,
right. And then you look at houses for $3,000 a night.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet.
Yeah,
like right down the street. Yeah. We end up in the houses because, you can rent some nice, there's a lot of rich people with extra houses. You know? And if you just call the agents and you just kind of negotiate a little bit, you don't use the apps.
There's a local successful entrepreneur that I heard just bought 7 houses back to back, I think in Kauai. They're like all along the coast. He bought 7 of them.
Jeez. I didn't even know there were 7 houses for sale.
Yeah, exactly.
Kauai. Where we are, it's like in Honolulu, there's like nothing. Or you can fix up stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what he did, but there's a multi-billionaire.
Yeah, I'm a renter. I was just talking about this, whether it's like boats or second homes.
Yep.
I'm not into owning all these kind of superfluous things. I rent them.
I've found the way it's worked. So we have a house in Cabo, but I share it with my siblings in a boat that we share with our siblings. When you have enough people that all use it enough and you're splitting the cost.
And your siblings and your friends, that works.
Yeah, exactly. If you can do that with a group that you all get along well, you use it together, you use it separately, and it gets the use, and then you're splitting a lot less.
Yeah, fractional ownership makes sense.
Yeah,
right.
But fractional ownership with random people, I think is tough. I know idea. What's his name is working on it, local guy, Spencer Raskoff with Picasso.
Right.
And I've
seen a lot of those advertised too, where it's like you can buy an eighth of it.
I think Danilo or somebody did Picasso.
I think you were right. It was someone. It was up in Napa. I almost want to say, or Sonoma, kind of northern area.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and I looked at it. Like I legitimately looked at it. But what happens is we travel to so many different places. Yeah. And my kids are young, so it's like, we might go to Greece next year, and it's like, they don't have a house there or whatever, So that's been part of it too. Is I love the flexibility of just being able to go. But Picasso is a great option, and the fractional ownership idea in theory makes a lot of sense. I mean, you don't want to buy a $4 million house in Utah that you use 2 weeks a year. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Agreed.
So we looked at buying a house in Hawaii because we love it so much. Yeah. But it was the same idea, and you get treated differently. It's funny. Hawaii is different. If you own a house in Hawaii, nobody likes you. If you're a visitor, they love you. So we're like, forget Hawaii. And now my wife is fascinated with Laguna Beach, where she's from. She wants to buy a house next door to the house she grew up in, except her mom's still there. I said, why don't you just go back to your house? Yeah. I was like, why do I have another house next to your mom, Yeah.
We have the same thing with growing up in Ojai. I was like, I kind of want to get a place up here. And my wife's like, my mom was in a great place that we stay at all the time. I was like, it's a good point. We're good.
Well, it's also, Ojai's like an hour away. It's nice. It's just like Laguna.
It's like Laguna.
Yeah. And it's like, so you're in this debate. It's like, am I really buying a second home an hour away?
Yep. Which, by the way, they say is the way to buy a second home, because when you buy it in Utah, you don't use it 2 weeks a year.
Well, that's why we would buy Laguna, because we'd go down a lot. But I think if we kind of circle back to where we started with marketing, and using tools to market, what are some of the things that you're doing as a firm that's different than the other firms like that help your brands? Like why? Obviously people say, why you as a financial advisor versus all the other guys? We all sell the same Apple stock, and of course there's service and there's, relationship, and that's part of it. But I think marketing today, and I think about this all the time for our company, it's so disjointed. In the old days, you could run a TV ad campaign and a newspaper ad campaign, and you reached a huge audience through those few tools, because everybody was forced onto one or two platforms, right? And now we live in a world, and I think even more so than ever, nobody gets their information in the same place as their friend. And so the way we all see the world is a little bit different. What streamers you watch, what shows you watch. Now everything's ad supported. So I think it's more valuable to advertise on Netflix and Hulu, let's say, than ABC and NBC, and somebody might say, but their audiences are bigger. They had this and that. And I was like, but how many ads did they run during, the Olympics? And you just don't watch any of them. And then when you're trying to watch some Hulu show and it's right before the show starts, you're kind of stuck.
Well, and you're stuck there for like 30 seconds and that's it.
So how do you determine what the best methods are? Does it change a lot? And do you run different sort of approaches for different companies?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing that we did was 8 years ago, thankfully, I was introduced to this whole idea of AI and what was coming.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay. And if I understand this correctly, like I understood the progression from machine learning to AI. And well, like, thankfully, I just got the concept and was talking to some very intelligent people in the space that knew it. And they told me timelines and everything. And I just went, I have nothing else to base it off of. So I'm just going to assume these guys are right. And like, Ray Kurzweil, who ended up being the head of Google's AI program, had put this timeline out. I think he put it out in like 2012 or 13 that said, the beginning of 23, we're going to have something that resembles AI. And ChatGPT 3 came out in November of 22. So it was like really solid.
Close
prediction.
On the timing.
And I just based everything I did off that and went, okay, well, I'm going to build my system that I'm not going to build AI. I'm not going to build the node. There was already Watson with IBM and stuff. I'm not doing
that's
that.
That's all hardware.
But how do I build my moat in that space, my answer to that allows me to operate? Because this is definitely going to displace a lot of what we do unless I build it and become the Uber to my own taxi company, so to speak. And so I started digesting as much marketing data as possible. So we ended up with about 8,000 companies, marketing, media, and revenue data plugged in directly in real time. And then when ChatGPT came out, and then we built our own algorithms, we started training it to say, this is what's good, this is what's not, this is what the benchmarks look like. So we can literally see instantly how the market's moving, similar to what a wealth manager does with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. We don't have that in marketing. So we built it. And then now we can plug in an individual company and it will literally pop up with, here are the 5 opportunities that you're doing the worst on, meaning like your click-through rate on these Facebook ads are 20% below market. If you fix that, it's worth 120 grand a month.
Right.
And then it'll also say, here are your top 5 biggest wins. Here's where you're outperforming the market. And that doesn't, depending on what you're doing, you might know, like, be careful because this could go the other way. You're riding really hot, like your click-through rate's 50% above market. That's not normal. Something's cool there, but like be careful banking on that in the long term. And so we built that. That's running. And so the vision of it is to then eventually start recommending changes, like here are the things you can do to actually fix this problem, and then just do it for you.
And I feel like that's big because, there are the Google Analytics that you could look at, or you could go on, Meta and look at how everything is performing. But then it sounds like yours really brings them all together and analyzes them across.
Like I'll give you an example, like click-through rates, and for example, and so I go on to Google Analytics in the old days, and I look at these numbers, and I'm like, how accurate is this? And
accurate. And when you're comparing apples to apples, it helps. But so I agree with you on accuracy, but you're going to have the same breakage. So it's like, again, you're comparing yourself to the market.
Yourself.
Right. But the other piece of that is people don't know, like, let's say you have a 2% click-through rate. Is that good? What about 3? What about 7? What about
it's like what's
0.1? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's amazing to me how marketers generally benchmark. So what are you seeing?
Well, and it's funny because like that was like the issue I dealt with, which was like, do we have good numbers? Are we doing good or bad? And then I realized we were actually doing well with it. And then, this was early AdWords, like when nobody in finance was doing it. And then when everybody started doing it, it was like, oh God, now our, cost per click went from like 150 to like 600 or 700. And we just stopped doing it because I was like, what I have to pay to compete with this now doesn't make any sense, you know? And that's for us. Fortunately, we got big on social media. So like, we don't actually spend a lot of money on like click through ads, So it was actually really one of our goals with you guys too, is really to see, how can you like really work with what we've done to make it great? And, and I think AI, especially when you think about advertising that's so data heavy and how most of the companies sort of like don't really want you to know really how well they're doing for you.
Which that's
I've seen that a lot where it's like, you're paying us to place ads on Google. Here's your numbers. But it's sort of like exactly what you're saying. Is that good?
And thankfully, so one of the fun things we've discovered by using these benchmarks is we outperform the market significantly. Which go figure. We have a bunch of talented people that know what they're doing and know best practices. We're going to. So I never had a lack of confidence in that, but a lot of agencies rightfully do. And we see it constantly. So now we literally, because it's instant, we'll just be like, hey, plug this in, like just accept the API call. And we can just tell you immediately how whoever's doing your marketing right now is performing for you.
Right. And so I guess we could see how Mia's doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess so. Track my performance.
Here's the irony of it, though. That's been the biggest challenge is when we go into bigger companies and like Fortune 500s, the CMO will look at this and realize
like, we're
not putting this in. We don't want a scorecard.
Well, fortunately, Mia has 4 jobs, so even if she loses one, she'll still have 3 other jobs.
I'm good with
it. She's figured out job security. Chase, on the other hand, we could probably get rid of. But like, it's like Mia's like, we have people who are like organs in the company and then vessels. She's like a major organ,
Yeah.
so we can't lose a spleen. Yeah, she's like a spleen. Alex, I don't know what Alex would be. He's maybe like, I don't know, small stomach.
Can't lose a stomach. Can't lose a small stomach.
We need all the different functions to
We
run
don't
the
have
full
extra
body.
people. Dee and I were just talking about the people we have to hire. We got to hire people. So do you do marketing from that perspective, like for recruiting actual employees? And
in
things
fact,
like
you mentioned
that?
we did Uber's employee marketing early on, and we did it for a while. Not rideshare, the like gig economy was really taking off. We were getting hired by a bunch of those companies to do employee marketing.
So one of the things that caught me in this conversation recently is you're talking about building AI and how you saw, machine learning. Okay, that's nice. And now, we have some really functional use cases for AI and depending on your industry. And, I have a dream that Bloomberg will get AI and learn my trading and make my life easier by making suggestions and things based off what I've been doing for the last 30 years. Right.
Yeah.
Along with research and things like that. I have found it to be super efficient, but we never built anything on AI yet. But we probably will end up. But I think there's a lot of people in the markets, in the stock markets, are saying, oh, this is hype. I don't see the point of this. How is this going to affect efficiency, whatever. But then when you meet somebody who's actually been employing AI in their business to not only stay competitive, you're not a massive firm, you're not Publicis or whatever. Right. So you're competing against massive firms because it's kind of like big 3 or 4 in advertising and they have all the resources in the world. But what happens is these firms are kind of behind because they have like 17 people have to approve everything. And so in your case, you very much feel that AI is a differentiating factor, not only for your firm, but also a game changer as far as being able to really provide value for your customers.
Yeah, in a huge way. Like it's one of those things, and I've heard a lot of people say this with crypto, which I think kind of killed the statement, but like AI is the next internet. Like every company is going to enable it in some way. You already are in most companies, and it's brand new. You're talking about 2 years ago, it really started taking off, and like most companies have something that they're engaging with.
Well, it's like I use chat almost every day for something.
Yeah.
And, like I want to feel
I have
good
it
about
constantly
myself.
up on the side,
Yeah,
just asking
I
the
said,
little
"Tell me
questions
about
that
Ross
come to my
Gerber
head.
because I just want to see if it'd say nice things about me, and it does.
Yep.
And I was like,
Exactly.
I like this.
That's
stuff.
one of the interesting
Same thing
things
with
about
Hawke.
having social media presence too, because if you look up anybody in our firm who does actively participate in social media and posts a lot, like chat now knows
Well,
them.
we're learning how it learns. Like it turns out
I made it evaluate my Instagram the other
They ran
day.
it crazy on YouTube. Because it was all the YouTube content. They run it crazy on the libraries, and so they got all the good writers stuff they stole. And then, and I think they've run it, obviously, like Elon bought Twitter just to steal the data for Gronk or whatever. So Facebook's doing the same thing from social, So when you think about a company like Google, which has the most information about us and what they can do to make their
They've had some slip-ups, though. It hasn't been working very well.
They're behind.
Yeah.
See, the problem with Google is, and I've thought this for a long time, is they're lazy. Like they went from the hardest working company and the most innovative company to super wealthy and just collecting checks every month from everybody, no matter what we do.
I will say, though, is from the marketing perspective, they are great at their agency, like their spend partnerships, managing their brands. Like they manage their core business very well.
100%. I mean, I always liked working with them. I actually have no issues with Google. It's mostly
but I agree,
like
the innovation side.
Well, it's also hard to imagine being that big too, But I remember going down to the Google offices here in Venice, and I was like, nobody works here. It's like, what is this place? It's like
the binocular one. That
one.
Yeah.
It was like the coolest office. I was like, does anybody work here? And this was before work from home.
Oh yeah.
I think they shut it now because
they're in Playa Vista now, right?
Yeah, they have a spruce goose hanger.
Yeah, but I mean, there's this one building that's like off Jefferson. That's complete. It's by Amazon. I think it's an Amazon building, and they built this glass building, and it's beautiful, and it's 100% empty and completed. And I keep driving by it like on the way to the airport and back, and I'm like, this is like a disaster.
Building. That's how we just got our new office. Was someone, I won't name them, but that built out an amazing office right before COVID, and then sat it empty for 5 years, and came down to earth on what they were going to be able to get for it with their long time.
We looked at about 5 or 6 of those before we found somebody who we're actually building our office.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. We're trying to kind of redesign the whole concept of what an office is.
Yeah.
Because it's not a place to just put a computer anymore.
No,
you know?
yeah.
And so, it's really it's mostly like a social club for advisors and clients is kind of what I'm trying to build.
Yeah.
And so like you have a reason to be there and, and have multi-purpose. But I looked at 5, buildings in spaces that were completely furniture included, everything like built out. It was almost like a ghost town,
that's how ours is.
And I was like, dude, this is the best time ever to like buy an office or whatever. But they weren't like that reasonable with price. And I go, you guys are crazy.
Oh yeah.
Nobody's renting these places.
Ours was very reasonable.
Yeah.
Like
they were smart.
When they came to me and said, do you want this space? Like, I don't need that space.
Right.
And they're like, well, what would you pay for it? I'm like, half of what it's worth.
Right.
Like, write an offer. I'm like, okay.
Right. But those are the smart ones. See, they were saying like, oh, we still want $4 and this.
Yeah.
I go, listen, guys. Like, you want me to walk out right now? I mean, like, you got to accept nobody will rent this office except for me. It's like the financial crisis when I was looking for houses.
Yeah.
And people don't believe you, but like, I get this question a lot because in Europe, people have gone back to the offices.
And I think it will happen here.
I think it's happening more. I think it's becoming a lot less of a thing that you can just get a fully remote job. At least things are hybrid.
Companies like ours that realize that it needs to be more than a place to put your computer. Yeah. I think young people today are starved for community.
That's what I was going to say. I think Hawke's very similar in the way that you guys have built out such a community. I've gone to a couple of your guys' events too, and I think it's a core of your overall business.
Social life, and it's part of your like.
But you need a core in the office that makes that desirable, because if you only have a few people that are showing up here and there, then it sucks.
Yeah, and see what's happened here is we grew twice as big and don't have enough space, and then like people complain and then they work from home and this and that. So like our new space is twice as big, so we won't have this issue. But it's really focused around community. Like you want to come to work. Like that's what I was saying. I don't want to have to force people to come to work. Like that's not. It doesn't work with the younger generation. No. So I don't want to be that boss. I want to be the guy that says, hey, you want to come to work because you're missing out. Like you're going to build your career. You're going to have fun. We're like in such a great area. And by the way, you're in a great area too. I love that area. And Bergamont's great.
Yeah.
They've done a great job. And so, work becomes like, that's what I say. Work is a lifestyle. That's what we're kind of, our focus is, I guess.
I think that's great.
Yeah. So moving forward, I assume that you're sort of all in on this, like AI, like also driving placements and
I mean, I think it's funny because the focus in most AI investing and like the AI financing side of things is all generative AI, and that's what everyone talks about. And I think that's got a long time to go. Like, I think it's actually more the data analytics, the rational side. You mentioned Bloomberg, like Bloomberg being able to spot trends logically that would fit what you want to look at and spitting that out to you is a great use for AI. Creating pictures and videos, I actually don't think is a good use of AI right now.
Right.
And so it'll get there, but I think that'll continue.
But it's like the shiny object.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the one that resonates with everybody versus just business owners that care about data and analytics and like certain people and executives. But I think that's where it's going to go. We've always been like, we've invested in over 100 different marketing tech and e-commerce tech companies. We have a whole fund on that side. So I just think technology in general continues to be a place where that's where the unfair advantage comes in these days in our industry.
I agree. In a lot of industries, I don't think I think you're going to see, we were talking about fast food, whether it be robotics and SoundHound doing voice AI, which I think is like huge, having a Siri that worked for multiple businesses. But like my basic feeling, like I try not to get too caught up in the hype. I work with guys like Dan Ives who are like, AI is this and that. And that's all he says all day. And not saying that he's wrong, but I try to like be more sober in my approach of like, what are we investing in? But what I feel in my heart is like, there's like decades of technology and data that we've created that really doesn't get used for any purpose. Right. And a perfect example would be like Google, when you drive with their maps and it tells you where traffic is and the way it routes you still what's the fastest way based off traffic, but it still doesn't take into account the stoplights and the fact you can't cross Wilshire Boulevard. Right. And I'm like so tired of it taking me to my death, basically, and it's like, at what point are you going to realize 26th Street goes through Google, 26th Street goes through, but the other ones don't, and it's like, so how does it not learn this? Right. And so exactly what you're saying, it's fun to like have it write a poem for you, but it's like the behind the scenes of like, oh, here's the analytics. And like for us, like we're super data heavy business, like we're
of course,
finance, right? And so it's like, well, what can it do for us? And that's the issue we're having is data. It's like, is the data good? We got multiple data sources, and then how do we create a centralized place for all?
My favorite metaphor for it is think of it as an army of 17-year-old interns. So what would you give a bunch of 17-year-old interns hanging out here right now to do?
Well, I got a 16-year-old.
There you go. So what would you have him do? That you can be like, hey, I trust you. You're smart. I'm going to have you go do this. I'm still going to proofread it, make sure I'm not going to go tell my clients to go trade off of, hopefully, no offense, but you'll get there.
Well, I was going to have them do shredding.
But no,
I started out as an intern doing that too.
Everybody starts off at the shredder here.
Right. Perfect.
We don't even have paper anymore. We have to find paper for you to shred.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
I know. It's like horrible. I'm like, we have old files from the 90s.
And I think the part that people miss is the human adoption curve. Like the technologies become really interesting, but it takes forever to actually infiltrate people. And so,
well, this is my full self-driving argument.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, robo-taxis, everybody's going to take them. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
People like their cars. Like, it doesn't just like, oh, I've been driving my whole life and now I won't drive anymore because Elon said so.
Yeah. And by the way, I was going to say that I don't know if you've had the same experience, but the full self-driving, I had it in my Tesla, but it has a camera inside that if it thinks you're not looking at the road, even if you are, it like dings you.
Right.
And then you have like 5 strike rule. I'm like, that's what really ended it me for Tesla.
And you just start moving the volume up and down.
That's why I don't use it.
Yeah.
So it went from like actually really helpful, but not perfect, to now I can't do anything in my car. Like I have to be this robot driver.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this is not, and it drives so slow.
Yep.
So I'm like, we're in LA. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't go 30 miles per hour or people are going to pull me over, you know?
Yep.
And so like, so I have a whole theory on AI, which I'm not going to go into today, but kind of what you're saying, I think generative AI is much more difficult than any of these tech people want to admit. Because what we started doing, me personally, was I actually started studying the human brain. Because I was like, if it's supposed to replace this brain, like, shouldn't we understand what the brain is? So then I asked AI, I go, how much of the human brain do we really know? And it said 10%. And I go, so how are we going to replace a human brain we don't understand? So then I started thinking about intuition. And then I started thinking about women. You know, women have really good intuition, you know, especially about people. And I was like, well, you can't just replace this with AI. No. You can't just have like Mia could look at somebody and go, I don't trust that.
I will say that I think eventually anything that we talk about intuition got that side of it. I think that's our brain working faster than we can comprehend is what it is.
I don't know if it's speed. I think that there's actually a vibe. Like I believe in a vibe. Like you go to a concert
I agree with you.
And there's like a vibe.
But I think we don't have the ability to comprehend what that vibe is. I think it's a way we explain it. I think that if you have a computer that's 1,000 times smarter than people, it can explain why the vibe is off. I believe that there is logic to that. I think it is so in depth that it'll be 15, 20 years before computers can do anything like that. But
I also think it's because the inputs are poor for computers.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
like your eyes are so good, and your ears are so good,
exactly.
And your smell. So like when you go to the Sphere, for example, which is meant to be like a VR experience, like when the smell comes in and like it's like immersive, it is like pretty crazy.
Yeah, right? I need to do it. I still haven't done it yet.
Well, you missed the dead, but but it's pretty crazy. Like a couple of the things they did. Some of it I was like, all right, I'm going to throw up. This is not great. Yeah. And then some of it I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Yeah. But the idea that we're going to get all this input from all these sources, be able to analyze it and feel something from it is a long way for a computer to
I agree.
go.
But I think it will get there. I think that because that's how I look at anything creative is also we think of like creation, like a new song or a new book or whatever it is. It comes from, this creative process. And to me, I still think that's us pulling from tons of life experience and tons of different things, but it comes from somewhere. It's not just out of thin air. And I think eventually...
I do. I think it comes from thin air.
You do?
I do. Okay. I think a lot of the brilliant creative people just come up with it.
It's usually like if you take like I don't know what it would be some of the most creative stories of all time, but it still pulls from something.
I agree.
Even the Matrix
but
pulled a little bit from the Bible.
For example, comes from pain. It just comes from pain. Yeah. And so if you look at like the history of music, there's anguish. Like a guy in our office just broke up with his girlfriend. He's all sad. And I said, it's the best thing that could have happened to you. And he's like, why? I was like, it's better to feel this now than what you'd feel 5 years from now when you're married and that's more. Okay. Because whatever you're feeling now, times it by 20. And it's like, and I said, there's 5 million songs on iTunes you can listen to that are all about this, and he was like, oh, that's true. I go, I play blues. So I can tell you it's almost every song,
What do you play, by the way? What instrument?
I play guitar.
Nice. Yeah, I grew up playing guitar.
Yeah. And so what I actually feel is great musicians or great artists do pull from the sky or whatever you want to call it. And it's based off this like depth of emotion that many of us maybe don't even feel.
Right.
You know, we were talking about Amy Winehouse the other day because I love her and her music's great, but it's one album, you know, and it was like, she was so messed up. She couldn't make it past 27.
Yeah.
And so I think
common age
humans there's part of us that isn't like, we can't make a robot that's going to be a real human. It's just not going to be.
Yeah.
So if it's real smart and can help me do lots of stuff, then it has a great purpose. And that's what I think the goal is with AI.
Yeah.
It's like, so you have like, okay, work efficiency and productivity. And then you have like, you know, does it really help society move forward?
Another good metaphor I've seen is the Dr. Octopus. Like, you're gonna have 8 arms instead of 2.
Right,
like,
right.
That's the way to think.
Well,
about
we
it.
were talking about octopuses the other day that they might actually be smarter than us.
Yeah, well, specifically octopuses.
No, it's true.
Great,
actually.
Did you watch that documentary? That was what was it on?
You'll
Hulu,
never eat
Netflix,
octopus.
one of them.
Yeah, it's Netflix. But no, I have a friend whose son is at this program at UC San Diego, and they do this marine biology program there. That's probably one of the best in the country. And I guess they have these tanks, and there was the octopus in one of the tanks, and there were these other fish, and they were like separated across the room. And I guess the octopus was sneaking out at night and eating the fish, and they couldn't figure it out. I go, wasn't that in a movie? And they're like, yeah, it was in a movie. No, this happened in real life.
Yeah.
And I was like, no way. And they couldn't figure this out forever where the fish were going. And then they realized they put a camera in there, the octopus was sneaking out.
Oh,
and
that's
stuff.
so funny.
And I was like, wow, these octopuses are smart. And it's like, oh yeah.
They only live like a year though, right?
No, I thought they lived a long time.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. Now I don't know. No, I don't know. I'm not that fluent on octopus.
Neither am I.
Spend most of my time
We
on
could
turtles.
ask Chat.
Yeah.
Turtles are great too.
Ask Chat. You know, that's
my wife got her master's in biology at UC San Diego.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great school actually. But I think ultimately, if you're young, one of the coolest things is what technology does that we don't know yet. You know, I always talk about the things we don't know.
Yep.
And it's like, so you can like, oh, well, Google will do this and Microsoft will do this. But there's a lot of stuff that will happen that we don't know. And innovation, I think, is really ripe right now.
Like I'm wearing a Whoop right now.
What is that?
It's
Right.
it just tracks your heart rate. And
so it's like an
rate.
Apple Watch, but
yeah,
without
exactly.
the watch.
Without the watch. Exactly. Right. And so, and I've been wearing it for 4 years. I have all my health data for 4 years on this thing, which
do you wear it at
my
night?
friend who's a personal trainer swears by that.
For like 5 days, and then the charger just slides on it. So it's like.
Did you wear it when your kid was being born?
Yep.
So you have all that data
And
of like when you're stressed.
My wife's wearing it now. So when we have our next, it'll be interesting.
So you're really into data.
I am very into data. I like honestly, where it comes from me. I grew up a video gamer, and so like
I'm a gamer.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. So
do you still play?
Not really, because I just find that it sucks me in.
He's recruiting more people for his team right now.
We have to be over 50 to be on my Call of Duty team.
We made an exception for Brett.
That is an exception.
Yeah,
because he's good.
But I grew up super competitive on that, and so now like business, life in general, like it's all like feels like it's going back to the video game days where I'm like I love tracking everything and quantifying everything and watching it grow. And so with this. What's awesome is now it's connected to UCLA Health, and they can actually see like, oh, that's your resting heart rate, and this is how it's increased.
That's really
like,
cool.
So,
I didn't realize.
You look healthy. I mean,
well, I'm training for my first triathlon, so I've gotten more healthy than ever.
Right.
And what's cool is to see what that's affected. Like,
well, you don't want to get so healthy that you become unhealthy. My brother started doing like all these Ironman and stuff. And
that's not.
He's all messed up.
But that's not healthy. That's human performance.
No, like some people get so healthy they become unhealthy. It's like like
you kill your
good.
knees and
your knees are gone. Yeah.
No,
I don't even want to go into it. It's ridiculous.
I'm with you. I'm doing it. Like I'm doing just.
Well, you're young enough that you want to do this.
Well, I'm happy I did.
You don't want to.
I did my half marathon, and now I'm not doing it. I'm not hurting my ankle.
It's mostly that.
I'm not doing an Ironman, but doing
but even a triathlon. Like I worry about my knees and running. You know, like for me, running is the hard thing.
My
like
stepdad's 82 can still run 5 miles a day or so.
No, it's not a can. It's just like I was looking at medical device companies today because we're doing knee and hip replacements like at record numbers. You know?
That makes sense.
It's at record numbers from all the runners and whatever. But you know, biking and swimming is what I do more of. And it's just
so those are great.
Low impact. And then when I go running, I'm like, I got to run once in a while because it's so low impact.
It's funny to say that. I think I'm going to do the LA Marathon. I've only done one, and it was years ago. Just because I'm like last chance. Like I'm going to do it now so that then I can taper off the running thing.
Right. Well, running is actually pretty harmful for your body past a certain amount.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I guess kind of, wrapping up a little bit here, I wanted to ask, where do you guys both see both of your industries moving in the future? Obviously AI being a part of it, and how are you both now staying ahead of the curve?
Well, it's funny because when you say industry, most of the financial industry, I think, there's a lot of financial incentive to be ahead of the curve.
Right.
And so firms that use technology better do better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been the case from the beginning. There's always been a race to have better technology than your competitors, better internet, better, data. And so this is kind of ups the game. And it reminds me very much of sort of like an arms race and that's what we're seeing with NVIDIA, why we own the stock and love it, is because the more money you put into hardware and the more power you have, the better results you're going to get over time on the data that you've been collecting forever. Kind of some of the issues we're dealing with at our firm about data and who owns our data and how we access that data so that we can use it better, because all our data is held somewhere where it's not that easy to use right now. So we're trying to fix this. So I think in finance, and what I actually see happening in the world, not just in my industry, is a even greater wealth inequality, which is unfortunate. Which is the people who get technology will make even more money and have more efficiency than ever, and the people who don't will be cast on the wayside. So if you have it was the first thing I did was teach my kid AI. Like I put him on AI, and he uses it now and then like he got in trouble in school for this. And I was like, and my wife's like, well, should he be using this for school? And I said, school doesn't matter.
Agreed.
Okay. School doesn't matter. Whatever that is, sorry, because you go to the expensive one. But,
good social experiment.
No, but like we were doing Brentwood, and I love these private schools. They're wonderful, but what they're teaching our kids is antiquated. It's just, it's not what matters in the future. And so like the only thing that matters is like, okay, like you should know history. But, like you don't need school for
I think
that.
school's very much memorization based when it should really be like intuitive thinking based.
And critical thinking. Like, we were talking like what are the reasons that slavery was such a big deal in the Civil War? Like, we think about the Civil War like, oh, there was slavery, but why was this such a big issue in America? Well, it actually goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And so like when you start understanding like the history of America, there's a lot of complexity to what was going on. Like George Washington had big problems founding this country. He was an incredible man. Like, I mean, you can't underestimate how smart these guys were. Jefferson, Washington, Franklin, like they dealt with enormous issues, including slavery. And they had slaves and they didn't believe in it. So it was a really interesting thing. So that's more interesting than what year was the Battle of Lexington and Concord. It's like this doesn't matter,
No, I totally agree with you.
And so I think we're going to see this massive shift of power to the people who get it versus the people who don't.
Well, and I also see this has become a thing. I saw a poll the other day that was and this is fun because you pay attention to this too. So there was a poll that was, would you rather work 25 hours a week and make 125 grand a year, or work 70 hours a week and make 300 grand a year? Like, what would you say?
Well,
to be clear, it's about 20% less an hour to work more.
Right, but like my whole goal in life was not to get paid $120,000.
Right. So that's you. That's me too. They did a poll. Thousands and thousands of people responded. What do you think? What percentage of? We'd all assume the majority of people want to work 25 hours a week. If you've been around, you know that. But what percentage do you think that was?
That picked that?
Yeah.
I'm going to say most. 70.
70?
I'm going to take that as guess.
That's 70?
Yeah.
That's what I would have thought too. 98.2%.
Yeah, so 98% of people rather work.
I knew it was going to be high. I didn't think it was going to be that high.
This goes back to my thing about your generation.
Yep.
And I think there was almost a nobility to working long hours in my generation or above.
Yep.
And so it was like, I worked a 12-hour day. And you're like, dude, you only made $100K. It's like kind of like my brother's a lawyer. And he gets paid very well. But when you add up the hours, he's working 2 jobs, essentially.
Right.
So I'm like, you got to take your pay and divide it by 2 because I work half as much as you. And it's like, it's kind of insane being a big time lawyer, you know.
Exactly.
But it's like you bill by the hour,
exactly.
and it's like, well, you have no leverage of your time, But I think that there is this is like the AI thing. It's the tech thing where it's like, maybe I can make all this money at home doing nothing. It's like the Bitcoin thing when Bitcoin started going up and everybody's like Bitcoiner and a miner and they're trading their coins. And I'm like, dude, you're going to need to get a job. Like this is not a real thing.
100%. And in 2020 and 2021, people saw success with that, with being an influencer, all these things, and it worked. What we're seeing now is like the average influencer that calls himself as profession and influencer makes about 15 grand a year.
Yeah, right. I saw
and
that.
So it's
stat.
like, and so it's like you're real. Like all these people have, I'd say
it's better than the actors though. The average at SAG is like 10,000.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so you have that sect of people that still are thinking maybe it'll come back. And so I think you're going to have a lot of people that, you know, I don't know what's happening with the economy right now, but if we do end up in some sort of recession or whenever there's a shift, there's going to be a wake up call where it's like, you can't make by the way,
I think that's happening now.
I think so too. And good luck making 125 grand a year working 25 hours too. Like that's a great stat.
I think that's happening now.
Yeah.
I do too. So this
but I think it's starting to stop, and I think that's why there's been less.
Yeah, but look at the fast food
that.
companies. A perfect example. So California says, okay, it's $20 an hour to work at fast food. Okay, fine.
Right.
But then these fast food companies are like, okay, we make burritos. There's no question a robot can make a burrito.
Yep.
And then it's like, there's no question SoundHound can take your order.
Right.
And then it's like, well, why do I have to hire people at $20 an hour plus benefits when I could just invest 100 grand and replace them or whatever. And that's what's driving AI.
And by the way, welcome to California where you can get sued by an employee and there's no recourse. They can make up a lawsuit. Like
I've just dealt with that.
Yeah, every business owner does at some point. And and you're getting to the point where it's like, I don't want to deal with this. And guess what? You're going to get people that go, the cost is worth it. Whether it's leaving like Elon Musk is, whether it's, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, but what's sad is like, it sounds politics are probably similar. Like I want protection for people that need protection in terms of like people that have been taken advantage of in employment and stuff, but it's been so abused that now you're come up with robotics and AI and people go, well,
I don't want to say that it's been abused. What I think it really is that the system is so costly and time consuming that you can't actually have a fair, trial.
No, when I say, I'm saying the individual that it sounds like you just had one, they are abusing it.
I still think in general, especially if you're going after bigger companies, they have resource. But I think what it is you're right. And there's crazy people and all they have to do is fill out whatever they want on a piece of paper. And it's true, right?
Yep.
Literally dealing with this today. But like, what I think is what's super unfair is if you're not quite a big enough business, you can just bankrupt small businesses left and right.
Yep.
Fortunately, we're big enough we can afford it.
Correct.
But I remember, I was just thinking 5-6 years ago where if we got sued, like it was like, oh God, we're gonna have to fire people. We can't even afford to operate. And and it's funny because I just upped all our insurance for everything because I was like, there's got to be a maximum of what my risk is to even operate a business. Right. What you're saying is completely true. And it's absurd, the cost, but the real crime is the cost. So
exactly,
like what is it? They wanted $20,000 a day for a mediator or something. And I'm like, this person gets $20,000 for one day's work. Yes, is the answer. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? I was like, do I make $20,000 a day? I don't think I do. I've got to figure out how to be a mediator.
Yeah, exactly. We only went to mediation once with one of them a while ago, and I had a great mediator. I got to give him credit. It was too awesome,
and she was great. She deserved maybe 10,000. But
no, totally.
Yeah.
No, he talked me off a ledge in terms of principle because it was frivolous.
Oh, you were still young enough. Where you had principle involved.
Yeah, exactly. No, the line he said, this was to his credit, I will always remember this. He goes, hey, Winston Churchill had a great quote. Principles are like top hats. They're excellent till you try to stand on them. And I was like, and that literally that line.
I love that.
I went, I think we should end with that.
And I was like, that was it. I looked it up and it calmed everything down. We settled.
Yeah, I don't know how old you are, but when I
37.
So I was about your age when I started dealing with these things. And I would be furious, And then they sort of sat me down and said, look, all these ideas about what's right and wrong, forget it. The legal system is about just paying. And so it's like, it doesn't matter what
cost of doing business.
It's just, you have to pay. So, like in this recent situation, of course, like I wasn't annoyed for 1 second thinking who was right or wrong. It's just like, how much is this going to cost? Because it is what it is, you know? And
as you said, insurance can help. But funny thing about that quote, not a Winston Churchill quote. I looked it up after. The guy was completely just BSing me to get me to calm down. And it worked. I was like, to his credit,
a good lawyer.
He did a great job.
Well, okay. Well, I was going to say we should end with that Winston Churchill because there was a time I was reading just Winston Churchill stuff because he was actually a crazy man. No, he really had a tough job. Right? Get bombed every day by the Nazis. It's kind of hard to run a country. So that said, Churchill was quite a brave man, actually. And was smarter than a lot of the other people in England who let Hitler do what he was going to do. So, anyways, nice to meet you.
You too.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
Thank you so much for coming on our show. If anybody has any questions, you can always reach out to us at info@gerberkawasaki.com. Follow us on all of our socials. Also check out Hawke Media. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you.
Yeah.